The day ahead for the UK Prime Minister and the latest developments following that summit that took place in London that wrapped up late yesterday. Well, let's now go live to Ukraine. Michael Boscu is Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and former spokesman for the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, joining us now live from Odesa. Good morning to you. What are your thoughts this morning following the extraordinary scenes in the Oval Office on Friday and then the summit we just have been talking about here in London yesterday?
Good to be with you, Sally. Well, pretty extraordinary. It seems things have moved at warp speed from that disastrous Trump Oval Office meltdown to very warm and fuzzy feelings in London yesterday with your Prime Minister and also with the King. But as your correspondent hinted, there's a lot of unanswered questions here in terms of what Europe can actually give. I for sure, this was a huge moral boost to President Zelensky. I listened carefully to him at that press conference at the airport yesterday, and he seemed to have kind of regained his mojo. But I think what will be noticed in Washington is that, number one, he didn't apologize, and he almost lightly, I would say, berated the Americans for the treatment he got. That happens as Trump is supposed to be meeting later Monday with his top national security advisors. And one of the things on the table, of course, will be whether to continue military aid to Ukraine. So a lot on the table right now. And I don't know if transatlantic tensions have been lowered.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that. President Zelensky says he is ready to sign a deal on minerals with the US. He wants the security guarantees, though. It sounds like he's not going to change his mind on that element. So what are your hopes of movement on that this week?
Yeah, it almost seems now that the rare earth elements deal is a sideshow. I think as I told one of your colleagues yesterday, it was pretty much a trap for Mr. Zelensky in the Oval Office. I think the Trump administration did some arithmetic, figured out that that deal had been so diluted, it's of no use to them in terms of throwing it to their base and saying, this is the best deal of the century. And also there was very little assurances in that deal about security guarantees. Here in Ukraine, a lot of people have told me, that they feel that the Ukraine is being set up to be a kind of economic colony of the United States. A lot of anxiety here. So it's very difficult to see a path forward with the Americans. And I should also note other headlines that the U.S. has suspended offensive cyber operations against Russia. That's a huge thing because they have also been providing teams to Kyiv to help them harden their cyber defenses. That's a stunning development, and I think it shows the path that the Americans want to proceed on. It isn't one that adds up very well for Ukraine.
And just before we let you go, Michael, your take on how the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has tried to sort of build a bridge between all sides, Europeans, President Zelensky and President Trump, talking about how he's had several phone calls with President Trump since the Friday Oval Office drama.
Well, I have to say he certainly did a great job of buttering up Mr. Trump. It must have sent the American president's cholesterol levels through the roof. But all kidding aside, I think, it's rare in geopolitics that we see a leader gain political capital overseas. And I have to throw my Prime Minister Trudeau in this camp. And then also depend on that for a boost at home. I'm afraid that a lot of economies, European, Canadian for sure, just have competing resources right now. And it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, as President Macron suggested, that everyone boost to 3 or 3.5% of GDP for defense spending. So, and then, in terms of the way Ukraine sees what happens, I don't think there was much concrete that was decided yesterday. Of course, those 5,000 missiles coming from the Ukraine will be very useful. And one more quick thing, Sally, if I can. I also noticed during the press conference that Mr. Zelensky was wavering a bit on whether he would stand for elections again whenever that time comes. And there will be questions here too about that, because no one wants Ukraine to succumb to Russian pressure or U.S. pressure to have elections, but there is a need perhaps at the municipal or parliamentary level for that to happen, at least to stress test the system.
Yeah. Michael, it's great to get your take on things, and it's also worth noting, as you were talking there about Canada's take on all of this, Justin Trudeau, of course, was here in London yesterday for the talk, standing side by side with President Zelensky. And yet tomorrow, Tuesday, Canada could be receiving news about tariffs on all its goods going into the US.
That's right.
All these things are so intertwined, aren't they? Michael, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you again, I'm sure, here on BBC News.
Thank you.